Hi, my name's Paul. I've been asked just if I'd like to share some of my experiences regarding addiction. My son David, who's 39, he's been in active addiction since he was 16, 18, and I'll just like to offer you some of my thoughts about that period of time. We were an ordinary family. I had two children, David, eldest, and Adam, youngest. Married, my wife. We had a pretty average family. I've always worked. Children were born, loved very much. Looked after, cared for. Interacted with their grandparents, were involved. My sister, as their aunt, was involved with them. As they grew up, everything was pretty standard. Went to nursery together, primary school. There's 3 years difference between their age. At the age of 8, Adam, at the age of 8, the youngest, he developed a condition called Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is a muscle wasting disease. This sadly is a terminal condition and very slow progression. David would have been 11 at the time. We were all devastated by the news, including David. It was very difficult times. As time went on, when Adam got to the age of about 12, David had been 15, getting towards the end of his secondary school term. Adam required much more attention to be looked after. He was in a wheelchair, disabled, and required most things doing for him. And the bulk of my wife and my attention was diverted onto Adam. We were consumed by it, really. And on reflection, I think I maybe took the eye off the ball with David a little. He was 15 at school. He went to an all-boys school. He progressed well at school. But just before he was due to leave school, maybe go on to sixth form, the problem started. We started seeing things going missing. First just little bits, then a bit of money here, a bit of money there, some of his possessions, and some of Adam's possessions, and some of our possessions. And over a period of 2 or 3 years, 15, 16, 17, David fell into addiction, unbeknown to us as parents, which, as I say, took my eye off the ball with him a little, I fear. When we discovered David had been using drugs, started with cannabis, and he progressed. One day I found him in his bedroom with a needle preparing to inject. I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. As a good father, so to speak, I went crazy. I ripped his room apart. I was devastated by what was going on. I didn't know what on earth to do. We were, at the time, with Adam, would be 15, 16, and requiring 24-hour care. David carried on in addiction. We went to our GP with him, which was a complete waste of time. And eventually after school, David got some work but never really ever held a job, and his addiction just got worse and worse. He eventually left home, stayed, as it turns out, we didn't know at the time, we thought he was staying with friends, but it turns out he was staying in a drug den, I suppose. He was being used as a carrier and eventually got picked up by the police, where he'd been asked to go give some drugs over, heroin, to someone, pass it on to someone. Turns out these people were police, he'd been set up, and it was his first time to jail. It was hard. We were told by the solicitors that because it was dealing, he would expect a prison sentence. However, when it ended up at court, I went to court. I couldn't do anything but try and help David. He's my son, yeah, I love him. I stood there in court, I stood bail for David. I promised I'd do everything I could to the judge to help David recover. I'd take him back home, allow him back in, against my wife's wishes. And the judge actually gave him bail. He spent 3 weeks in prison on remand, but then came home with me. This was at the year 2000, millennium of 2000. David had been using about 4 years up to that point. It affected the relationship between myself and my wife. We never really spoke about David. She found it extremely difficult to cope with him, with the problems with our other son as well. We basically became quite almost mechanical in our operation as a family. The care that Adam required became more and more intense and was full on. And we wanted to care for Adam. It wasn't his fault. David carried on using. The problems continued at home, that stuff missing, stealing, lying, cheating. It was one of the hardest parts for me, was to be lied to David. I was becoming the only one of the family who would actually have anything to do with him. He left home again, went and stayed with friends, hostels. Eventually got himself a flat from the local council. I equipped it for him, furniture, carpets, cooker, that sort of thing, and continued to basically enable him in his desire to carry on using drugs. It became extremely difficult for me. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stop it. I'd always worked and I fixed things for people. I'm a repairer, a fixer. People give me problems, I would go fix them for them. It's what I used to do for a living. But not David. I couldn't fix his problem, no matter what I tried, and I tried everything. As I subsequently learned, there's only one person who could fix David, and that was him. As time went on, David's addiction got worse and worse. He would constantly harass me for money. Over years, it became extremely draining. I couldn't push him away. Everybody else had. No one would have anything to do with him. But I just couldn't say no. I just carried on feeding his habit for him. It's the only thing I thought I could do to help. He would ask me money. ring me up in crisis, problems, no food, somebody's going to beat me up, got bills to pay, they're going to throw me out the flat. I would just jump into the rescue. It became worse and worse. Eventually, David was on methadone, had been for a number of years. He used to get his scripts from a place called Renew Food Trust. And he had at some point given them permission to speak to me about him. I'll give permission for them to actually talk to me about him. Renew had, about 5 years ago, Renew had recently set up a family support service where they would offer help to family and friends of people in addiction. And I got a phone call out of the blue from them asking if there was anything that they could do that may be able to help me. By this point, this would be 2015, 2016. I was at my wit's end. I didn't know what to do. I was depressed. I used to work 24 hours a day. We had lost our youngest son, Adam. The disease had taken him, the muscular dystrophy. And I was looking at losing my other son. I carried on enabling him with money, mainly. I got more and more depressed. My wife and I basically went through the motions as a married couple. I was in denial about David. When Renew rang me and asked if they could help, I fortunately agreed to go see them. I was met by someone there from family services who took me in, listened to me, and I spent an hour crying, dumping my irrational thoughts about all what was going on. When I was asked, or I was told that people do recover, people with addictions can recover, I actually laughed, just spontaneously laughed. I thought, well, that's crazy. Once an addict, always an addict. I carried on seeing people at Renew weekly for over a year. And I slowly came to understand what was happening with David and his addiction. And I learned more about addiction, about what is happening to them. And that they're not doing it to me. I always thought, why is he doing this to me? He isn't. He's doing it to himself. They can't help themselves. It's an illness. Fortunately, as I had more and more time with people at Renew and eventually group sessions, and I discovered I wasn't the only one with this problem, which I thought I was. I thought, how on earth can anybody else be suffering this? But there were mothers with children in addiction. There were wives with husbands in addiction. There were husbands with wives in addiction. There were brothers and sisters of people with addiction. And what struck me when I started going to group meetings on a permanent basis, which was after about 2 years, it was difficult for me to do, but I'm so glad I did. But what struck me was that all these people had exactly the same story as me. There was no difference. They were just the same. They struggled with understanding what was going on. They couldn't believe it. And slowly we learned that the care and rescue that we do for these people, or try to do for these people in addiction, our loved ones, that all the effort that we put into it, if we just put a little bit of that effort into ourselves. And at some point, it dawned on me that I can't fix David. I've tried everything, and I had tried everything. There was nothing else I could think of. Even after speaking with people who knew addiction, I never learnt anything that would help me fix David. He had to fix himself. So I started to try and fix myself. I started to say no to David. I was still there. I was still enabling him. Eventually, it carried on the same. I had a better understanding. I became clearer about what was going on. And, I mean, I can't say that it ever became easy, but understanding what's going on does help. For David, in January 2018, he actually decided to give reducing off his methadone course another go. Now, he'd been through this system many times, reduction on methadone, get down to the last 20-30 mil, relapse, start using again. But this time, he decided he wanted to give it a go. I asked people at Renew if there was any point in me being involved with David's recovery and his caseworker, and is there any use in me being involved with it. They jumped at the chance of me actually being involved with Renew, his caseworker, and David, and getting him into recovery. I used to go to his casework meetings with him. I would go to doctor's appointments. I wouldn't say anything when I was there. I would take him to appointments. I would just be there for him. I still used to enable him with money, but I used to do it when I wanted to do it and when I thought it was right. When I was asked for money by him, I would just take a moment to think, and I would decide then whether it is right or wrong for me to do so. If it was wrong for me to do so, I would explain to him why I'm not giving him money. I'm not going to give you this money. It was only 4 days ago that you got your benefits. What's happened to them? And now we all know what's happened to them. You'd used them on drugs. His recovery from January 2018 on methadone, he reduced off his methadone course, and we began to rebuild our relationship. I saw more and more of him. I believed that he wasn't using. I had no signs, and I knew the signs that he was using. He still smoked cannabis. He still drank a little, not too much, but a little. He would have discussions with me. We talked, first time in years. We actually had conversations rather than arguments. I would make point of seeing him at least once a week. We would go have coffee together somewhere. We'd go and have something to eat. Our relationship started to build, and some trust started to come back. Because, of course, trust, as we all know, is one of the first things that goes, and it is an extremely difficult thing for them to get back. David managed his own reduction course with his caseworker at Renew, at the meetings I used to go to. They listened to him, and he decided on the speed that he would reduce, and they agreed, and it worked. On the 24th of August 2018, he took his final dose of methadone. It was the first time in 20 years that he didn't have to go to chemist to pick methadone up. It was a fantastic achievement, and I was extremely proud of him. We carried on building our relationship. He was still sadly not allowed home. His mother still wouldn't have anything to do with him, neither would other people. They still saw the addict David. I saw the recovering David. And I wanted to support him in that. I was coming towards retirement, and I used to let David come to work with me for 3 days a week. We were clearing out a warehouse. Business had been sold and it all needed clearing out, breaking up, putting in a skip, breaking down into components. He came with me and loved that work. I would pick him up in the morning. We'd go to work together, do the work. He found it very tiring. He found it physically exhausting, but he enjoyed it, and our relationship blossomed. In July 2019, I was supposed to pick David up in the morning. I'd text him, be ready, meet me outside. Normally he would. This particular day, no sign. I had to go, so I went to work. It's difficult for me to say, but at this point, David had relapsed. He'd started using again, and he took an overdose. And on the 21st of July 2019, I found him dead in his flat. Toxicology reports subsequently tell us that he died of drugs overdose, heroin, cocaine mainly, among other things. Such a sad, sad loss of a life, of my beautiful boy. It's hard for us to know how to manage when they're like this, but we have to try. We love them. They are our children. We love them. We must keep trying to support them, but we have to look after ourselves. I can thank you for listening. I'll leave it for now. Thank you. Bye.